Hello, and welcome to the October version of PD and PJ's Instructional Technology webinar series. This is Lynn Erickson, and this month we're going to talk about assessments with Google Forms. Our goals and objectives for this activity is to create a Google form that contains a variety of question types, such as short answer, true, false, multiple choice, checkboxes, and so on. We're also going to learn how to create a theme for your form and adjust settings. We're going to set up the Google form for manual grading or automatic grading. You're going to learn how to create a password to lock the form and view results within the form or through Google Sheets. So in order to get started, you should open up your Drive. And within your Drive, you should go to the folder where you want your form to be contained. So if you're creating a form for an assessment, you might want to have a folder in your Google Classroom or in another place for your particular chapters or units where you will be creating your assessment. You want to click New, go to More, and go over to Forms, and that will make your form for you. So let's jump over to that. First thing you want to do is title your form. So this particular one is going to be an integers assessment. So I'm just going to title this Integers Unit 1. And if I click up here in the title, that will replace the untitled name with the same name that I just named it. So here's my integers at Unit 1. Okay, before we move on, we need to go over to look at some settings. So I'm going to click on the little cog or wheel in settings. And the nice thing about Google Forms is you can automatically collect email addresses. So if I check this box, it's automatically going to collect my students' email addresses. So if I forget to add in to have them put their first name and last name, I will know who took the assessment because it has collected their email address. For this particular assessment, I want to restrict to just users in Stafford Public Schools. That means that my students will have to log into Google in order to take the assessment. And this is up to you how you want to do this, but you can have your students edit after they submit or see summary charts and text responses. You can also limit to one response. I'm going to leave that unchecked in case I want to have them take the assessment over again. I don't want them to edit after they submit, so I'm going to leave that unchecked, and I'm going to go over here and hit save. Now you can make each one of your questions automatically required. And instead of having to put each of your questions in as required, I can go up into the little traffic light, click on More, and go down to Preferences. And I'm going to have this automatically checked to make my questions required. And because I'm giving this a quiz, or giving this as a quiz, I can change my default quiz point value to anything I want it to, or I can manually put it in later. So I'm just going to leave it at 5 for right now, and I'm going to hit save. So now every time you type a question, you don't have to click the little slider to make it required. So the first thing I'm going to do is collect some information about my students. So I'm going to click in here and I'm going to ask for their first name. It's going to automatically default that as a short answer. And as you see, it's automatically required. I'm going to click the question again and add last name. The reason why I'm separating these two, it's easier to sort later on when I take my results and turn them into a sheet. I also want to find out what period they're in. So I'm going to click and type in period, and then I will put period A, period B, period C. I'll do one more. Period D. I'm going to change this to multiple choice, and this is a required question. So I want to separate my students' information from the actual assessment itself. So you can see all my tools over here. What I'm going to do is add a section break. And I'm going to call this particular section Unit 1 integers. This will break this apart from collecting their class information to the actual assessment itself. So we've talked about the title and theme. Let's actually go in and look at the theme. So let's go back to this. Up here, I have just a purple background. If I click on this little paint palette, I can click on this, and this will give me some theme options. So I can choose my header being an image or a color. So I'll just click Other and pick something a little flashy maybe. So that will change my theme, and then I can just close out of that. Okay, so as you can see, because we automatically said we want it to collect an email address, it'll show this right within the form. It's automatically collecting the email address. So if I were to click the eyeball to preview what a student would see if they were to take the assessment, you're going to see it's automatically collecting an email address. And I have this separated with student information. And then next, obviously I'd have to fill this in. So next would take me over to my actual assessment. So let's start building that. So now that I've created a new section, I'm just going to go on and click the plus sign to add a question. So let's talk about the different questions that we can add. So we're first going to start with just a short answer. In my short answer, I'm going to go over and I'm just going to type in integers can be positive or, and I want students to fill in the answer. So this is short answer text. Again, this is automatically required. So here's my short answer. I'm just going to click the plus sign and add a new question. This one I'm going to make as a multiple choice. So we'll do 3 plus -7 equals, and I'm going to change this to multiple choice, and I'm going to put some options. Okay. Now that I have a multiple choice question in there, I'm going to go ahead and add another question. And this one is going to be a drop down. So we have multiple choice so far. Let's go to drop down. And we could do 6 minus 5. And my drop down, I could put my variety of answers. So with a drop-down question, students would have a list of answers that would automatically drop down and they would choose the correct one. So let's go to checkboxes. Checkboxes allows us to have a variety of answers and they can check more than one. So with a question like that, we could do something like 12 can be the result of. I can put some choices in here. As you can see, as I type in more answers, it just drops down to another choice for possibilities. If I just hit the tab and tab over, that will give me more options. Okay, and now that we've done checkboxes, I'm going to add another question, and this time we're going to go over to paragraph form. So, paragraph is a little bit different than short answer. Short answer is just going to be a word or maybe a short sentence. A paragraph will allow students to write quite a bit more. Now, these types of questions obviously are open ended. So, when you go to grade the assessment, these are ones you're going to have to grade yourself. So, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So, I'm going to just do a paragraph question of explain how to solve the following. Okay, so students would have to answer here. So let's go over and preview what this looks like. So I'm going to click on the eyeball to preview. Let me fill in this information because this is required. And click next. And now this brings me over to my actual assessment. So this is where you can see where students would be able to fill in their answer. Here would be the multiple choice. Here's your drop down. Here's choose more than one answer. And then explain how you solve the following and their long answer. So your open-ended question. Okay, so we've talked about putting in names, class period, and actually creating the quiz. We made another section for our new part of our quiz to separate student information from the actual quiz itself. We looked on how we can preview the quiz to see what it looks like so far. We've talked about the different types of questions where you could do short answer with a few words, multiple choice, students choose one answer, check boxes, student choose more than one answer, and drop down list, students would choose from a drop down list. It would just be one answer, and paragraph form where students would write several sentences. So let's talk about adding an image because there might be times if you're a math teacher that you want to put in equations. So there's a pretty cool equation editor, and it is CodeCogs. So this equation editor is pretty cool because it allows me to use all these different functions. Let's say I just want to add a fraction in and I want to make a quick question that would involve fractions. So I'm going to just say 3/4 and I want to add in fourth. Okay, see it puts the equation right here. And what this allows me to do is to then just right click on it and go to copy image. I could also save it if I want to pull it in for my questions later, but I'm going to click copy image. The nice thing about this, let me go back to my editing part of my assessment. I can add another question, and when I do that, I can first go over to add image. And I'm going to go by URL. I'm going to go back to this and I'm going to go to copy image address this time. And if I paste in that image address, that's going to give me my equation, which I can select and add in. There's my image. And I could just say, solve the following. So a nice way for science and math teachers to get equations into a Google Forms using as an assessment. You can also password protect your assessment. So we are going to actually add a question called password. But what we want to do is we want to put it in our first section where we have our student information. So I'm just going to go over where we had period and they had to determine which period class they're in. And I'm going to go over and add a question. And I'm going to call this password. And you can see there's 3 dots down here at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and click on that and I'm going to go to response validation. And what I want to be able to do is I'm going to change this to text and it's going to contain certain information. So I'm just going to say 12345 will be my password. And then I'm going to put some text in here that says, please ask your teacher for the password. Let's spell this right. Okay. I'm going to make this a required question. And they can't move on until they actually put that password in. So let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to click on the eyeball, putting in my information. So if a student goes in to try to type in the password and they don't know what it is, they have to ask the teacher. So I'm going to put in my password. Now it allows me to continue on to my next section and actually take the assessment. Okay, so now actually let's go into settings and actually turn this into a quiz. So let's go back and we'll close out of our preview. Okay, so now that we have our quiz built, we actually want to say that this is a quiz. So let's go over to settings. And we've already said we want to collect the email addresses. We don't want to limit to one response in case we want them to be able to take it over again. We're going to go over to presentation. So we could shuffle the question order, but in this instance, I'm not going to because I password protected it. So that question order, that password might be on the next page. Same thing with my student information. So in this particular instance, I'm not going to shuffle the question order. And I'm not going to show the link. Well, I'll leave it on showing the link to submit another response, at least for now, so you can see what that looks like. And I will turn on show progress bar. So let's go over to quizzes because we want to actually make this a quiz. So I need to turn this on. And we're going to look at the release grade section. So if I do immediately after each submission, students would get their grade immediately. But because I have an open-ended question, I have to switch it over to later after manual review. Otherwise, this is going to give students not so great of a grade because the open-ended question is not graded. So it's going to mark it as wrong. So we want to make sure if you have any open-ended questions you want to do later after manual review. Now, this is other thing you can decide on whether you want students to see which questions they missed, what the correct answers are, and what the point values are. I'm just going to leave those as on. I'm going to go over here and click Save. Okay, so if you can see now that we have it as an actual assessment and we've made it as a quiz, we're not going to do an answer key for this one. This is just the password would be 12345. So we're just going to leave it at that. But now when I go over to these questions, I can go over to answer key. I can add the correct answer. The correct answer is negative. We're going to mark all other answers incorrect. I'm going to also add a uppercase in case students write it as an uppercase. So you see you can add more than one correct answer. And again, maybe you'll have something in your room. In case they spelled it wrong, they'd have to go up and look up on the wall to spell it correctly. I can also add answer feedback if I wanted to, and I can also change the point values here. So let's go on to the next one. We want to add an answer key for this, and that would be -4. Go down to this one. Okay, here's where we have the choosing more than one answer. So this is where I'm going to choose all of the correct answers. So we said negative or 12 can be the result of, we'll do this one and this one. The other two are incorrect. And explain how to solve the following. I could just give feedback in here. So remember the integer rules we discussed in class. And I'm going to hit save. Okay, so I gave feedback for the students. And now that I have the whole entire thing sectioned off and we're able to add the correct answers in there, let's go and see what it looks like to actually take it. So in our settings, we talked about releasing grades. We want to make sure we do later after manual review because we have that open-ended question. So let's now go and take this assessment. So I have to go up here and click on the preview. And I'm taking this. So notice that it put points next to all of these. So I would need to fix that because remember I said that each question is 5 points. So I'm going to go back and change that real quick because this is just collecting information. So we're going to do 0 points for, whoops, that was 5. Let's go back up to the top. First name. And we're going to do 0 points for that one. Okay, so now we should be all set to actually take this. Let's go back and click on the eyeball again. And the student would put in their information. Now they're actually in. So integers can be positive or negative. Let me answer a couple of these correct and incorrect. Okay, so I'll just put partial for this. Let's pretend I filled this whole thing out. I'm going to submit. And I'm going to submit another one just pretending I'm another student. Because we want to look at the results. Okay, so let's go ahead and submit that. So now that I have my students have submitted the answers to their assessment, let's go back and actually look at the results. So immediately you're going to see as a teacher that there are two responses. When the students took the assessment, they did not get instant feedback because we have to go back in and actually grade this. So when I go back to responses, you'll see that I have a summary, which would be of the entire class. And I can really look and see which questions they did well on and which questions I still might need to go back and review with the class. And I can also see how they explained how to solve that open-ended question. So I can look summary view, I can look question by question. And I can see that it allows me to grade question by question. So this was just they were putting their name in. I can see how they responded to that. I want to go all the way over to my open-ended question. And it says that they're ungraded because these are open-ended. So I can look to see how they did, and I can go ahead and, well, they really didn't give much information. So let's look at their response. And if I see that they just didn't do well in this, I'm just going to mark it as, well, they didn't get enough points. I could also give them partial credit if I wanted to. So let's just give them partial credit. And for this one, they did really well with this, so I'm going to give them full credit. And now I can go down and save it on the bottom. Okay, so if I go to individual, you can go and view each student's individual grades or individual how they responded on each question. Now you can see if I go all the way down to the bottom, this is how they answered. I can change their credit or I can leave it as it is. And if you can see back up at the top, after I have graded all the open-ended, I can now go ahead and release their score. So what this allows me to do is check off all my students. I can give them a quick message to say, great job, let's discuss this further in class. And it's going to send them an email and release the grade to them immediately. So they'll get an email with their entire quiz, with all of the questions, how they did on each question, and how you graded that. Just going to hit cancel for now. There is another way that you can look at all of the student responses, and that's over in Create Spreadsheet. So this will allow me to create a new spreadsheet for this particular assessment. So I can click on Create. It makes it for me right into the same form folder or same folder where I created the assessment. And I can go and look at each individual student, how they did. Again, this is where you can do your sorting and filtering if need be. And you have how they solved. Here are your questions up above and how they solved each answer or each problem. So I'd like to thank you for attending the PD in Pajamas for October. And I look forward to seeing you again in November. Thanks so much and hope you have a great rest of your day.